unfold.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into something wild, a 60-year cycle of, well, disruption. We're going to start with a really bizarre demographic mystery and see what it just might tell us about the year 2026.
All right, let's just jump right in with a real head-scratcher. Back in 1966, something happened in Japan that permanently scarred its population data. Get this, nearly 500,000 babies that were expected to be born that year just weren't. They vanished from the statistics. And no, this wasn't because of a war or a plague or some huge economic crash. So what on earth happened?
And when you look at the numbers, the scale of this thing is just, wow, it's staggering. The birth rate dropped by more than 25% in a single year. And then, the very next year, it snapped right back up like nothing happened. I mean, you're looking at a statistical cliff face here. It's a demographic shock wave that we can still see the effects of today.
So, to figure this out, we have to peel back the usual layers of data, the economic and social stats. We need to look for a cause that's running on a completely different kind of logic. I mean, just think about it. What force could possibly be powerful enough to get hundreds of thousands of couples to all decide, together, not to have kids for one specific year?
Well, it turns out the culprit wasn't some kind of material crisis. It was a story, a really powerful, really old superstition, one that's tied to the 60-year cycle of the East Asian calendar, and it's called the Year of the Fire Horse.
Okay, so what is the fire horse? And why did this idea have such a powerful grip on an entire nation? To get that, we've got to look at the cosmology behind the whole thing.
So, the technical name for this year is Bing-U. Now, in this 60-year calendar cycle, every year is a combination of a heavenly element and an earthly animal sign. Most of the time, the elements kind of balance each other out. But once every 60 years, you get this. You get fire stacked right on top of fire. It's like a perfect feedback loop of pure, uncut energy.
Let me break it down for you. You've got Bing, fire, which is like the sun. It's huge, it's radiant, you literally can't ignore it. Then, underneath that, you have Wu, fire, the horse. That's more earthly, it's intense, it's all about action. So when you slam those two together, you get a year of just unbridled energy. We're talking creative destruction and events that just spin things up.
And right here, this is the heart of the fear. The old superstition said that if a woman was born with all this fire energy, it would be, well, a disaster. She'd be too headstrong, too passionate, too rebellious, and, this is the kicker, she would bring an early death to her husband. This is the belief that literally emptied the maternity wards back in 1966.
Now, this fear didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It was basically cemented into the culture by the true story of a girl named Yayoi Oshichi. She was born in the fire horse year of 1666. The story goes, she fell in love during a massive city fire, and to see her lover again, she started another fire. Yeah, she was caught, she was executed, and she became this cultural legend, the ultimate symbol of a woman whose passion was so intense it could literally burn society down.
But, okay, you might be thinking, is this just a bunch of old folklore? Well, let's look at the actual historical record. Because if this fire horse thing really is an archetype for major upheaval, then we should be able to see a pattern in the previous cycles, right?
And when you look back, the pattern is actually startlingly clear. These are not quiet years. You have 1846, which was all about aggression and expansion. Then 1906 was about things erupting from below the surface. And 1966, as we saw, was a sort of quiet cultural rebellion. It seems like each cycle takes that same fiery, transformative energy and expresses it in a way that fits the times.
Okay, let's zoom in on 1906. The vibe of this particular fire horse year was all about violent eruption. Forces that had been building up pressure for a long time just underneath the surface, suddenly bursting through.
Think about this. A huge earthquake, followed by a fire that basically incinerates San Francisco. In France, a coal dust explosion, we're talking fire underground, kills over 1,000 miners. In Russia, the peasants are literally setting fire to the nobles' houses. A revolution kicks off in Persia. It's just a year of fire, both literal and metaphorical, just consuming the old world.
All right, let's rewind another 60 years to 1846. This time, the fire horse energy showed up as something the ancient texts call a yang blade. The theme was all about sharp, aggressive, severing actions.
So what's that look like? The U.S. declares war on Mexico and violently severs a huge chunk of its territory. In Poland, peasants rise up and massacre the nobility. The Great Famine in Ireland hits its absolute worst point, severing people from their land and from their lives. And, of course, the tragedy of the Donner Party unfolds, a truly grim symbol of survival at any cost.
Okay, so we've got the myth, we've got the shocking demographic data, and we have a pretty clear historical pattern of disruption. So the big question is, what happens when we apply this 60-year algorithm to the world we live in today as we head into the next Firehorse year, 2026?
Well, according to this way of looking at things, the total dominance of fire in 2026 is going to create a ton of systemic stress. Fire just amplifies itself, right? So that could mean things like market bubbles or extreme heat. It evaporates water, which could translate to a breakdown in diplomacy, or, literal droughts. It melts metal, which points to major stress on the financial system. And it incinerates wood, a symbol for resource depletion and just massive burnout.
So where might we see this play out? Well, the first big area where this fire archetype seems to line up perfectly with modern trends is what you might call the Promethean fire of AI. And look, this isn't just speculation. The godfather of AI himself, Geoffrey Hinton, has pointed directly to 2026 as a potential turning point. A year where AI's intellectual fire could start to burn beyond our control. We could be looking at a year of insane acceleration, of rapid, maybe even uncontrollable growth in machine intelligence. All right, let's move on to the second major theme. And this one is maybe the most literal interpretation of the Firehorse you can get, the celestial fire of our climate. 1.5 degrees Celsius, that one number, that's what's at stake. It's the critical line in the sand that scientists have been warning us about for decades. And guess what? The UK's Met Office is predicting that 2026 is a likely candidate for the first year we ever breach it, even if it's temporary. A year of double fire in the sky, and very likely, a year of record-breaking heat on the ground. So what do we do with all this? How do we take this strange mix of ancient cycles and modern data and turn it from just some spooky prophecy into an actual strategy?
Okay, let's just quickly recap the key takeaways here. The Firehorse seems to be a recurring algorithm for disruption. The year 1966 proved without a doubt that a cultural story can have a massive impact on reality. And 1906 and 1846 showed us that these are years of transformation, not stability. So all signs are pointing to 2026 as a year of really high volatility and maybe even irreversible change.
But at the end of the day, maybe the Firehorse isn't about predicting one specific future event. Maybe it's more like a diagnostic tool for right now. It acts like a wildfire. It doesn't just destroy randomly. It burns away what's already dead or weak or unstable to make room for new growth. And so, it leaves us with one really powerful question as we look ahead to 2026. In our world, in all of our systems, and maybe even in our own lives, what's ready to burn?